Hungry Trilobyte podcast would like to start by acknowledging SoonerCon. The longest running pop culture con in Oklahoma has a new look, a new mascot, and a fantastic guest list. Join us in Norman, Oklahoma, June 30th through July 2nd, 2023, and meet celebrities such as Billy West, John Scalzi, Erica Harlicker, and John Swasey. Visit SoonerCon.com to reserve your membership. On tap today, we have one of my favorite people on the planet, Mary Jo Pehl. How you doing?
I'm good. I didn't realize I was one of your favorite people on the planet.
You
I'm
really
honored.
are. I've been following your work for ages. I mean, granted, I got to know you through Mystery Science Theater 3000, but I followed you through your writing and through Rifftrax and Cinematic Titanic. And I would say I actually had a guest on a couple of weeks ago. I said, when it comes to Rifftrax, as much as I love all of them, the ones with Bridget and Mary Jo tend to be my favorites. So you're definitely a favorite of mine.
That is really cool. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really I love getting to work with Bridget, and she makes me laugh, and I love that I get to do Rifftrax. So thanks. And the comparison is high praise indeed.
I got this book of yours here. You purchased it, what was it, last year? Dumb, Dumb, Dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to talk about it. I'm very thankful for this book because I needed this book a lot. But I like to say it's a very funny book and you're a very funny lady, but the subject matter is not something people tend to laugh about. So I don't know how to start that conversation.
Yeah, Aaron, that's really interesting. You said you don't know how to talk about it. So I want to know more about what you don't know what to talk about it. Is it the sort of paradox of the subject matter and my sense of humor?
Yes. And not that I don't expect that, because having read your humor for a while, I kind of know how you put a spin on things. But the book, to not give any spoilers, it is about the last experiences you have with your mother going through her things, which is something nobody's looking forward to. It's a tragic point in all of our lives. I've lost a parent myself, so I know exactly where you're coming from. And I could not, I had humorous moments, but to actually make a whole book out of it is difficult. And I've recommended this book to people based on their experiences. And I'm like, I don't want you to think I'm downplaying what you're going through by recommending this book, but I truly think it's going to be helpful and you're going to get a laugh even when you don't necessarily want one.
Wow, right. I think I really just tried to write from a place of authenticity, and I think there is a real universality to families and parent dynamics. I know it can go the extreme in either way. I don't want to minimize anyone else's experience with their family unit, but I just tried to write from a place of truth. And the book is about finding my mother's card catalog of all the books she read over maybe, I don't know, 15 years, I can't remember. And she read so much that she started forgetting what she was reading. And I set it up at the beginning of the book that when she and I would talk about books, I'd be sitting across from her and she would tell me about what she was reading. And then she would say, but I swear I've read the damn thing before. So she started keeping notes, and we found this card catalog after she died. And it just really spurred a lot of memories. And I'm sure it's kind of, how you try and work through your relationship or your memories and contextualize somebody, which I think is an ongoing process with a parent.
And it's a process you don't necessarily realize until you're at least in your 30s, if not 40s or 50s, because you start to realize that this person that you thought was so old and so experienced when you were a kid is where you are now. And you don't have a clue what's going on in your life.
Right. They were just like you really get perspective. They were just winging it too. And one of the things I tried to articulate is the idea that I don't know that I ever saw my mother as being multidimensional or human. She was just sort of this opposing force, painting that in very broad strokes. And then as you age and you start experiencing your life, you realize, oh, yeah, my mother had hopes and dreams beyond 5 little kids by the time she was 28.
Mm-hmm. And you get to the point where you're starting to realize that you're putting yourself in their shoes now, and you're wondering, and you also bring this up, that sometimes that the culture just pushed it on them, that they had to do this, they had to act this way. There were some more concrete expectations of them in their generation than we have now, which is good and bad depending on how you want to, depending on what your ambitions are.
Yeah, really a cultural force that she talks about. You barely even questioned them.
Mm-hmm.
At the time she got married, she and my dad got married in 1954. And when I would ask her questions about getting married or having kids, one thing that she would typically say is, it's just what you did. And she wasn't trying to be complacent about it. She was reflecting back on the cultural forces that she just went lockstep with this process.
And at the time, that generation was just so thankful that they could get a house and they could start a family, and they had some level of security, which was something that the previous generation never had. So there's like, okay, let's embrace this. And then a couple of years later, you're like, maybe that had consequences.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Aaron. Yeah, and it kind of made me realize it when she read, and I talk about this in the book too, is she read The Women's Room, which is a feminist novel, and she got really mad about it. And we talked here and there about it, but just reconsidering those life choices that she didn't even know were a choice. You know, she got married at 20, and by 28 she had 5 kids.
And on the other hand, you got the chance to go off and you started a career which I don't think any of your siblings shared. You did something totally different. You went to New York and you started the show. You did your stand up. And did your mom? I wouldn't say did she support that, but did she understand your motivation to do that?
I don't think she did. That's a really good question. She did not. I think she was always really skeptical, because again, she came of a generation where a very 9 to 5 generation, and her big thing was, do you get benefits with your job? And I just never fit in with that world. So I kind of, after losing many jobs in a row, I kind of got stand-up comedy and writing and theater kind of found me. And I don't think it wasn't on my radar, and it certainly wasn't on my family's radar. They're very pragmatic. You know, all my siblings have like quantifiable job skills that they can fill out on an application. And it never occurred to me, and I don't think it occurred to them either. They just, and bottom line is, they were just concerned about my well-being.
Mm-hmm. And that gets to be difficult as well, because you know that they mean well, you know that their heads are in the right place, but they don't necessarily have all the facts when it comes to what's available to you. And there are some people that try to go off and they think they're going to, take a bus to LA and the next week they'll have a sitcom, and that doesn't work that way either. But there are people like yourself who they put in the grind, they do the work, they get lucky, they hone their craft, and it works out. That's not an
Yeah,
unreasonable thing.
yeah, no, and it was dicey, but I didn't have a choice, because I couldn't hold down a day job. So I totally lucked out, but I've also worked really hard. And I have so many friends and colleagues who are super talented and work their butts off. So I'm always hesitant to say that I made it or it's so great for me, because it's such a fickle industry, is my point. You know, I have really talented friends and they work hard. I just got some breaks along the way. Like, who would have ever thought that the Twin Cities would have be home to a cult show that I had the opportunity to write on? I mean, who even conceives of that? And I don't think my parents really understood what I was doing in terms of comedy or theater or writing and freelancing, the constant hustle. And then when I got Mystery Science Theater, they, of course, the first question was, well, do you get benefits? And we did.
Hmm.
And so they were very relieved about that. Um, but I still don't think they got what it was. Like my mom would brag about it, but she kind of didn't know what she was bragging about. I think mostly she was just relieved that I wasn't going to be living in their basement.
Fair enough. I and that's something that today in the current world we can totally believe that. It's like, oh well, there's this amazing show that's being produced out of nowhere. Back when MST3K started, and even through most of its life, that was not the case. In the pre-YouTube world, you didn't believe something could happen outside of New York or LA.
Bingo,
And
exactly.
people will say to me, and not that I'm successful at all in the creative field, but people will say to me, I'm afraid to leave my day job. I'm afraid to do this or that. And it's like the day jobs of the world are not as secure as you think they are. So if you want to do this, it's not going to be easy. Take a stab at it.
Bingo, especially in this day and age, it's not like it used to be. And I think my parents thinking, and understandably so, was that you get a job out of college or high school or vocational school, whatever works for you, and then you stay with that company. Which, Aaron, now that I'm articulating it, it occurs to me that my dad always had a day job, but he was also an entrepreneur. Like he made his own businesses, he had side hustles. So it's interesting to me that maybe it wasn't as foreign to them as I thought it was. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. I mean, if I remember the stories, he had the shop. He was the mayor for a while.
Hmm.
And I mean, these were all things that you just kind of made sense, I'm sure, at the moment.
Right. And so, maybe they did recognize that sort of piece of themselves in me. My mom had a card shop, a card and gift shop, she worked part-time. So maybe it wasn't as foreign as I Im- imposed on them, because
Mhm.
I was learning how to do it at the same time they were observing me trying to learn how to do it. So there was a
Mhm.
learning curve for both of us. And I think I just, by making my way in this scrappy world of freelancing, I taught them. And not to sound lofty or anything, but like I say, I didn't have a choice. Those were the things that came together for me, not the 9 to 5.
Right. And the tools that you had available to you were not the tools that they had available to them. They said, "Oh, well, here's a place with a cheap lease. We can start a shop there." So that's what they looked at. And it takes talent to recognize those opportunities where they are.
That's a really good point. And they had resources, they had life experience. My dad had his own accounting business, all the things, all the side hustles, the experience. And yeah, I was feeling my way through life, and I still am. So
Well, and just to bring it back to the MST3K thing for a minute, after the show ended, there were a bunch of different projects to revive it. And Cinematic Titanic, I loved. People would ask why they didn't do it. It's like, well, they had to rent out a venue and get the rights for public exhibition and make DVDs. And Rifftrax was just a much more low overhead model that could reach more people faster.
mhm.
It just made sense. You
Yeah.
figured that out as you went along.
No, right. And I think it kind of speaks to how all of life is sort of an experiment. Even if you are in your day-to-day job, you're just everybody's. I used to think everybody had it figured out all the time, and none of us do, especially in this day and age. But yeah, I loved Cinematic Titanic. There was nothing like performing in front of a live audience. And it was the first time I really got to see, like, really meet fans face to face, Aaron, and see their appreciation. And it just got me in the feels in my heart. It was just, I came up doing stand up. So you love that live interaction, and then to meet the fans afterwards, there was nothing like it.
And what with the fans seeing a show go away, generally speaking, you think that's all she wrote, and we're going to move on to the next thing. We'll probably buy a box set and revisit it now and then. But to have it come back, it was not a normal thing to have happen. So people were jumping in on it, and as a fan, it was like almost a mini convention every time there was a show. People would gather together. They would make plans around the trip. It was the first time in my life I could go up to a total stranger and say, "Watch out for snakes," and they knew what I meant.
Oh my God, that is really that's so great to hear. I love what you said about it being a mini convention. What did you go to Cinematic Titanic shows?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where?
I
What's
went
your
to some in St. Louis. I went to some of the ones in Texas. I want to say those were in Dallas.
Oh my gosh, wow.
The one where they did the meet and greet at the video store was, I think, my second one.
I remember that meet and greet, but I can't remember what city it was in.
Okay, I know it was in Texas. I want to say it was in Dallas. It could have been Austin.
I don't think it was Austin. It's Dallas sounds
Mm-hmm.
right. That's really cool.
It was the coolest thing because I had caught that meet and greets notice on the web as I was scrolling through something. It disappeared. I couldn't find it again. So I just had it written down on my notepad. And I'm like, did I imagine this or whatever? The notice disappeared. I went there and my traveling companion looked at me and said, what are you on? This is not going to happen. Why are they going to meet us in this video store? And then I heard Crow's voice say, "Hey, everybody, we're back."
Oh, that's so funny. Okay,
And I'm like,
where are you located?
I'm in Oklahoma City.
Okay, so you kind of Grateful Deaded a lot of these shows.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Excellent.
mm-hmm.
Wow. Excellent.
Yeah, it was just what I did. I had just moved to Oklahoma from Pennsylvania. This was like the thing I could do to kind of see the countryside a little bit.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And again, it was a chance for me to chase something I'd liked for a while in a totally new format. I love film so much, and the way each individual riffing project takes its own spin on the concept, I couldn't get enough of it.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I often marvel all the time. I marvel that this is crazy that this is what I do. Like my skill set is getting ever narrower and narrower and narrower, but I keep working, I keep doing the thing. So
And I think it's a case of where, I mean, you have a voice too. I mean, when people, they follow your writing, they listen to your work, you can sometimes tell when a joke comes from a certain writer, even though it's being delivered by the same cast members. And was you have the certain shoe size voice in your board from the MST3K Amazing Colossal Episode guys. That was your perspective, the shoe size.
oh, interesting, right.
I'm misremembering the joke, but yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's a question we often get is if it has several iterations, like like just referring to Mystery Science Theater, do the characters write the jokes? No, we all wrote the jokes. And how were they assigned? And sometimes you could just hear it in Crow or Servo's or Joel's or Mike's voice. Other times you knew each actor was capable of putting their spin on it.
And you joined the show fairly early in its run, I believe season 3.
Season 4.
Season 4. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So they're picking up new people. I'm wondering what the conversation is like when one of the writers comes up and says, "Would you be interested in working together on a more permanent basis?" Because, with the show being the crazy experiment that it was, I'm wondering how they brought in new talent from the pool of mostly stand-ups in the area.
Oh, well, I'll just speak to my experience and my understanding of how the base group, if you will, came together. Jim and Joel and Trace and Kevin collaborated because Jim had the KTMA connection, as did Kevin. And Trace and Joel had known each other from doing stand-up, and Trace was instrumental in creating the visual look of it. And of course, he's a fucking comedic genius. Can I say that word on
You
your
certainly
podcast?
can.
Okay.
Please do.
And then they brought in Mike Nelson, and I think Josh was part of the original group too, or he was brought in very early on board. Not to split hairs, I'm trying to think how that went. And then Mike came on board, then Bridget came on board, and Frank was in the original. Yeah, okay, I'm confusing the issue. So one by one, people were pulled in, and then when they got picked up by Comedy Central, Bridget called me. She and I had been doing stand-up and hanging out a lot. And the way my memory is she called me on a landline back in olden times. And she said, you didn't hear it from me, but Mystery Science Theater is looking for another writer. And then, of course, in my imagination, she hung up the phone immediately so the call wouldn't get traced. It was very dramatic, you know. And so I mustered up all my courage and I called Mike and I said, in my imagination, my voice was very tremulous, like, even though we'd been doing stand-up together for years and I knew him. Hi, Mike. You know, I just want to let you know that if Mystery Science Theater is ever looking for another writer, I'd be interested in auditioning. And he said, well, interestingly enough, we are looking for another writer. So I auditioned and was lucky enough that they found me suitable and kept me on.
Where are you seeing the current stand-up theme in as much as you might follow it? Because it just seems like with the way the stand-up industry has moved to Netflix, a collaboration like an MST3K might not happen as fluidly as it did back in the day.
I don't know. Can you say more about what the question is, like what you're looking for?
I'm putting it together in my head now, but I'm just, because with Netflix being the kind of the stand-up vehicle that we go to now, instead of what we used to do where stand-up would come out on CDs and DVD or VHS even, or Comedy Central was a big venue for it at the time. It just seems like nowadays everybody's looking to just kind of get their own special, and the stand-up collaborations and the offshoot projects. I don't know. Is that something that you see happening as easily these days?
Boy, I don't know. I don't really have a beat on that. I don't know that it happens quite as homegrown and organically as it did in Best Brains, but I do see that a lot of stand-ups are collaborating with a lot of other stand-ups are directing their specials. Okay. So I think it's a pathway for furthering their career. I know that's a really vague answer.
No, but that's kind of what I was getting at. And it was just a question popped into my mind right here. So I confess I hadn't prepared it there, but I just started realizing, wait, I mean, stand up, I loved it, especially through the 90s, but it is a very different world now than it was then.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to put a spin on what impact that has on not necessarily that art form, but that the other talents that stand-up comics tend to have that they don't necessarily develop until the moment presents itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I have to sit with that for a while. I just feel like the way the group came together for Mystery Science Theater 3000 was such, just so collaborative. It's not like there weren't egos in the room, but by and large, we were always working toward improving the show, making it the best show we could. So I am so grateful, and I learned so much from that dynamic. You know, we all wanted our jokes in there, but we all were able to evaluate the quality of a joke and how it worked for the show, and it never got cutthroat. There were tempers, you know, we would argue about jokes, but you had to make a case for it. You had to make an intelligent choice for it. And nobody walked away threatening anyone else with "you'll never work in this town again." So I'm really grateful for that experience.
When you go through a movie the first time, especially a movie you haven't seen before, it's like you have to riff this. That first viewing, can you even write jokes, or are you just processing what you're seeing in front of you?
You can, like, the energy in the room, you just throw in, and you learn how to just start to throw in. There have been movies where you are processing it. Manos comes to mind, where I just remember a lot of stunned silence, and I'm sure there were others, but Manos is the touchstone for that dynamic. And the group energy is such that if you need to stand down for a while because you're overwhelmed or tired, there's other people throwing stuff out there.
I ask because when I was reading the MST3K episode guide, like cover to cover many times over, that was always my takeaway from it is I want to understand what it's like to have a goal in mind, a process in mind to write these movies. Like when I did the iRiffs back when Rifftrax let people submit their own, and trying to do that on my own, I was doing my best, but it's like there's got to be, when people actually do this professionally, I'd really like to see. It's like trying to see an athlete in their best form. Like, how does it happen?
Well, I think it points to something else, and that is when Bridget and I do Rifftrax, we're writing independently, right? So we come up with our scripts individually, and you do lose the dynamic of an in-person writing room where somebody can see a scene and have a whole different take on it. Then you get to build on that. You're seeing all these other perspectives. When Bridget and I meet in person and compare our scripts and refine the scripts, there's still that building process, and it's really fun, but it's a whole different thing.
You and Bridget have a tendency, and the other guys will do this too, but you two are especially good at it. What you almost have a continuity in your own minds of what these people are doing and why. You end up making up your own little stories about so and so is doing this for this reason, and that ends up being very funny. It's a great way to fill silence. I've noticed that.
Very interesting. And my first reaction is, I wonder if it doesn't point to the female dynamic to be ultra aware of the social dynamic in any given situation. That's not an answer. It's just a reflection on that observation. Yeah, I definitely project the dynamic of what's going on in this on the screen. I think Bridget does too. I think it's rife for a lot of humor, and I think for us it makes us relatable to what's happening on the screen and with each other, and hopefully for our audience.
When I was giving it my spin ages and ages ago, I found it very easy to try to build off of a line and do a comeback or a snarky response to dialogue. But it was usually a better joke if I actually stood back, stopped paying attention to the dialogue, and just looked at what was happening on the screen and built from that. So
do you have an example? That's really interesting. Do you have an example?
Trying to think of trying to think of some of the ones I'd done. But for example, in I Accuse My Parents, it's really easy to just go ahead and talk about, fire back at the hokey dialogue and talk about how the guy's a lot. But the joke that always hits, no matter who's watching it, is when they open the door and there's the picture of the duck on the wall and everybody goes quack, 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 quack. It's always funny. It always gets a laugh just because you see a duck, you hear quacking, and it's like, it just tickles that funny bone in a way you're not expecting.
That's so funny. Right. Yeah, and I think that gets back to what everyone is noticing on screen or hearing on screen. And the thing I loved about Mystery Science Theater and Rifftrax is that with so many points of view, it could be all over the map, totally non sequitur, and there was always something to find. It was really a lot about unpeeling a lot of the social mores of all those educational films. That was fascinating to me.
The educational films are a treasure trove, and I'm so glad they haven't been lost to the ages, as they very well could have been. They needed to be brought back for this very purpose.
Right, right. We like to think we've done our part.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, I went to school at like the very, very tail end of that era. They were still dusting off their really old ones and throwing them up there. So I can only imagine what it was like when this was supposed to be the cutting edge educational tool that was going to keep kids taking baths and staying off drugs.
I know. It's kind of stunning. And just when I think I've seen the most amazing one, another one comes along. Like we just did one produced by the military, I don't know, maybe the Army or something, that shows how women enlistees are supposed to look and behave. And it's not militaristic standards, it's cultural standards
Yeah.
about like making sure your hair is done right and lipstick, and you should probably see a hair professional. It was really kind of mind blowing. And like I say, I always think, man, I've seen everything. Oh, wow, here's another take on that, really reinforcing that.
Like, just to go back to the ones about the kids bathing, it's like if you have a 10-year-old kid who doesn't know to comb their hair and brush their teeth, is the movie going to make the difference? I really wonder who sold that idea.
No, that's a really good question. And what is it for? Is it for conformity and uniformity? And wow, Aaron, I don't think I've looked deep enough about what how those came to be and who pitched those and why they thought they were responsible for making sure Debbie's nails were clipped. You know what I mean?
I'd done a little bit of research, not as much as I would have liked to, because time is short. But I really did look into it a little bit, and it seems like they were always sold as like a big package to schools of like 15 movies about this, that, and the other thing. Schools would buy them, and they like, well, we spent the money on it, we have to use it, because in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, it was essentially what we treated the internet like now. It's like, this is going to be the educational tool of the future. Home video projectors are the thing.
Oh,
This is the technology, and whether it was actually the best use of it.
wow.
In the late 90s, Bill Gates wrote this article on kind of the same thing. He's like, you have to understand what computers are not going to do. Computers are not going to solve all of our problems. We thought that was going to happen with home movies. We thought it was going to happen with TV, and it didn't.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. Hey, if you come across that article, would you forward it to me? Because that
I
sounds fascinating. But you're also pointing to something, it just triggered a thought in me. This constant societal need to standardize things. We
mhm.
want to standardize everyone bathing. We want to standardize women's hem lengths being a certain height. We want to standardize, standardize, standardize. So just the energy and the motivation that we're going to make this happen with this film. It's again, I'm just speaking off the cuff. I have to do more research. I just have to do
Sure.
more homework.
Now, and I love these movies. I love looking up the history of stuff like that that doesn't really get a lot of traction. So I'm going to pledge to you, I'm going to look back into this and see what I come up with, and I'll put it in the show notes if I get anything.
I love it. Yes, I
I'll send
appreciate
everything I
that
can to you
pledge.
too.
I appreciate that pledge, Aaron. Thank you.
Well, in the meantime, I wouldn't want to get out of here without giving you a chance to let people follow your adventures on the web. I mean, obviously you're on Rifftrax. I'll put that in there. Where else can people track your stuff?
I am doing a streaming show called The Mary Jo Pehl Show with my co-producer Chris Gersbeck, and you can go to dumb-industries.com. He produces the Mads show, the Mads Are Back show. My show, Jackie Neiman Jones has a painting show, which is great. And so Chris and I get together once a month and we have guests and we do game shows. And we just did, if I may, Aaron, we just
Please.
had the most amazing show where in one of our previous show, we have a really dynamic community for the Mary Jo Pehl show. and they're very active on the chat, and everyone's having fun, hopefully, knock wood. And at one point, somebody said in the chat, the Mary Jo Pehl show should really have some sort of cult robe. And I think we were discussing like Manos or something. It all intersected. And so we had viewers contribute their designs for a Mary Jo Pehl show cult robe or cult outfit. And Aaron, you would not believe how creative and amazing and smart these people are. And I invite everyone to join. It's just fun and silly. It's a different theme every month. And as part of that, we do Movie Joe Night, where we have a movie watching party once a month too. It's not riffed, it's not produced, it's not scripted. We just all hang out and watch a really great dumb movie.
That
And Dumb Dumb Dumb, my mother's book reviews, is available through my website, mjpeel.com, or Red Hawk Publishing and Amazon.
I'll make sure all that gets in the show notes. And those social nights sound like a great idea. I'm going to follow up on my son myself. That sounds awesome. And this would be, I would be remiss if I didn't remind the audience that Jackie Naaman Jones was in episode 4 of this show. So if you want to scroll way back, you can cue that up too. Mary Jo, thank you so much for being here. I truly do appreciate it. I look forward to have back anytime.
My pleasure, Aaron. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And can I just say that Jackie is a delight. I want to hang out with her, and her painting show is so, pardon me, so fun. So thank you for having me. Thanks, everybody.